Before I became a Christian, for me, life was work. Tireless work.
Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that through my being with you, again your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me.
For me, for a long time, I lived for, and I'm not proud of this, but I lived for girlfriends and academic achievement. Those were the two big things. And when I didn't have those things, I just felt worthless. I mean, I felt like I was not lovable. I felt like I was not a worthwhile human being. I felt invisible. And to be honest, I felt miserable. What about you? What are you living for? Well, here's one way of finding out. Ask yourself this question. What is the one thing, if it was taken from you, would make you feel like life wasn't worth living? Something you can't miss as you read this section of Philippians, and actually the whole letter, is Paul's joy. Now, as he's writing, he's under house arrest in Rome, chained to a Roman guard day and night, knowing that at any moment the order for his execution might come, and yet he keeps telling them how joyful he is. Now, I don't know what you're struggling with at this point in your life. It could be problems with your marriage, problems in singleness, at work, perhaps persecution for being a Christian. But if Paul can be joyful in his circumstances, then surely there can be hope for us in our circumstances too. Since Paul became a follower of Jesus, just about everything had been taken from him. The most recent report from the organisation Open Doors says that Christians worldwide are facing the worst levels of persecution in modern times. At a conservative estimate, the number of people currently facing persecution for following Jesus stands at 215 million.
And even when I came here, 10 years, they throw stones on my windows. I couldn't sleep in the night. Just in the middle of night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the stones started to throw on my... That was here. That was in another place where I was before I came here after bombarding. And in Kosovo, I was persecuted. I was almost every week to the police station. And they were visiting my home very often. And I was in prison 1 month because of distribution of literature.
Amazingly, with all of his hardship, Paul says, I rejoice and I will continue to rejoice. What's the secret to Paul's joy?
The author C.S. Lewis said, "Don't let your happiness depend on something you may lose." So what does your happiness depend on? Comfort? Money? Sex? The approval of others? Family?
These aren't necessarily bad things, but they are fragile things. And when they go, they'll take your happiness with them. But the secret of Paul's joy is that he's living for something else, something glorious that can't die or be damaged or be taken away. For to me, he says, to live is Christ. He finds his deepest happiness in Christ.
And because he knows Christ is in control of all that happens to him, turning everything for good, all his circumstances are cause for rejoicing. Not even his chains can depress him because they've served to advance the gospel.
Because of his chains, a constant stream of high-ranking, hard-nosed, thoroughly pagan Roman guards are being shackled one after the other to one of the most persuasive evangelists who ever lived. So the whole palace guard are hearing about Christ.
And that's emboldened others to proclaim the gospel without fear. And even if there are jealous Christians trying to stir up trouble for Paul while he's in chains, they're preaching the gospel in order to do that.
So Paul says, what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether by false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. The way to know joy in every circumstance is to know that Jesus is in every circumstance. Paul saw the fingerprints of God everywhere, even on his chains.
What Paul couldn't have foreseen is this. At the start of the 4th century, the Roman Empire launched a sustained effort to crush Christianity completely. And by the end of the century, even the emperors themselves were followers of Christ.
So to live is Christ. But Paul doesn't stop there. He says to die is gain. Now, how can death be a gain? And of course, he doesn't say this lightly. The threat of death is constantly over him. He's got no idea when he's going to be called to present his case before the authorities. His life might be over in an hour.
But Christ is more than a way of life to Paul. Christ is a way of death too. Paul knows that even if he dies, all that will happen is that he'll be united with his greatest treasure, his greatest happiness.
And that will make you radical, radically fearless, radically loving. If Christ is the one who gives you most joy, not money or family or sex or comfort or status or freedom from prison, if Christ is the one who gives you the most joy, then nothing can rob you of that joy. Suffering and death become your servants. All they can do is usher you into the presence of your deepest joy. To live is Christ, and to die is gain.
I knew if they kill me, I go to heaven. I was not afraid. And there is a text in the Bible that Jesus died on the cross to deliver us from the bondage of fear of death.
Would you go so far as to say you were joyful in the middle of that?
Yes, I was really joyful. Yeah. I was so happy.
Why were you happy?
Because I felt Christ's presence with me all the time. He was just near me.
But if we're honest, a lot of the time, Jesus isn't our greatest treasure, and so we miss the secret of joy. If we're honest, we would rewrite that sentence. For me, to live is having friends and family around me, and to die is loss. For me, to live is being comfortable and avoiding all suffering, and to die is loss. For me, to live is enjoying my freedom, and to die is being confined to a small wooden box in the ground. So here's the challenge. If your closest friend, the person who knows you best, were to finish that sentence for you, what would they say? For you, to live is what? What is the one thing, if it were taken from you, would make you feel like life wasn't worth living?
There is only one way of living that death cannot steal from you, and that is to live for Christ. Because when death comes, it'll only succeed in bringing you face to face with your greatest joy, face to face with the one who died and was raised from death so that you could join him in a place where death and suffering no longer have any claim on you. Face to face with the one who knows the very worst about you, yet loves you the very best. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain.